Hey there, Algebra 1 peeps. Hope you're doing well. In the first lesson of week 2, we are going to continue solving quadratic equations. We're going to review solving quadratic equations by factoring, which we've already done, and I'm going to introduce a new method, which is called completing the square, and that can be used when factoring doesn't work. So, the first example on your worksheet hopefully looks like this. Okay, this is going to be factorable. Notice though that this equation is already set equal to 0, meaning there's a 0 on the right side. When you're looking to try to factor, you should always set the equation equal to 0. If there's anything on that right side, you would add or subtract it to move it to the left side. Okay, now hopefully remember how to do this. To factor a trinomial with a coefficient of 1, because there's no number out front there, there's a 1 there. To get the a squared, it's going to be a times a. Okay, and now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to this 16 and add to 10. Multiplies to 16 and adds to 10. And make sure the signs work out also. It has to multiply to a positive 16 and add to a positive 10. So that would be positive 8 and positive 2, either order. Okay? And then what we do next is we say if this group times this group is equal to 0, then if either group is equal to 0, then it'll multiply to 0. In other words, set each group equal to 0, a plus 8 equals 0, and solve. And a plus 2 equal to 0, and solve. And of course, you guys got to where you did that without showing any work. Subtract 8 on both sides and you get a equals negative 8. And notice that is just the opposite of what's in here. You're figuring out what value of a here will give you a 0 inside. Okay? Solve it algebraically by subtracting 2 on both sides. Okay? Or just look in here and think, what value of a right here will give me a 0 for this group? So a is negative 2. So we have two answers, negative 8 and negative 2. And both of them, if you plug them in the original equation way up here at the top, if we plug them in up here, they will check and give you 0. So that's what you do if it's solvable by factoring. Okay, we're going to do another one like that just in case you've forgotten, because you probably need some warm-up on that. Okay, so here's another one that we can solve by factoring. It's a quadratic equation, set equal to 0 already. So to get the m squared, I need an m times an m. Okay, and now I'm looking to find two numbers that multiply to a positive 5 and add to a negative 6. Now remember, if it multiplies to a positive, that means your signs have to be the same. So my signs have to be the same, and they're going to be the same as this. So I definitely have to have two negatives here. Okay? Now I'll repeat it. I need two numbers that multiply to positive 5. Well, it's got to be 5 and 1. Okay? And to double check, they should have multiplied to a positive 5 and added to a negative 6. Now continue to solve the problem. Remember, if this group times this group equals 0, then when either group equals 0, you'll have an equation that multiplies to 0. So, what value of m here would make this group equal 0? M equals 5. What value of m here would make this group equal 0? M equals 1. So we have two solutions. And just to prove that they work, since these are both really easy to check, I'm going to show it to you real quick. If we let m equal 5, and I plug that in right here, where the m squared is, 5 squared would be 25. Whoops, let me change the color of that. Okay. So 5 squared would be 25. Then I plug in the m here, okay, for the other m. 6 times 5 would be 30. And then there's still a plus 5, and that's supposed to equal 0 if it checks. If you add up the two positive numbers, 25 and 5 is 30, and 30 minus 30 is 0. It checks. Okay, now let me check the positive 1. I'm going to plug it in way up at the top again. 1 squared is 1. 6 times 1 is 6, and plus 5. Let's see. Add up the two positive numbers. You get a positive 6. minus 6, yep, it does equal 0, which is what that original equation means. Okay, before I go on to the next part of the lesson, because this is going to be new, you may want to go to the worksheet now and work out all the ones that are to be done by factoring while you've got that fresh in your mind. And then when it gets to the completing the square section, stop and come back to the video. Okay, so first, try factoring, and you'll see for this problem, you can't find two numbers that multiply to negative 38 and add to negative 4. You can try all day, but you won't be able to find those. So we need a different method, and that method is going to be called completing the square. So here's how you complete the square. It's going to be a little bit complicated at first, but trust me, you can do this. You guys always freak out on day one of learning something, but I promise you can do this, even though it won't be easy for the first round. Okay, so first, when you complete the square, you need to move the constant term to the other side. Okay, to do that, we're going to do the opposite. Since this is a minus 38, I'm going to add 38 to both sides of the equation. Okay, that's my first step. Okay, what results is a squared minus 4a. Leave some space, bring down your equal sign, and 0 plus 38 is 38. Okay, that's the first step. And you do want to always leave this little bit of space right here, because you'll see why in a minute. All right? Okay, now I need to complete the square. Complete the square means to turn this into something that is a perfect square. And it's going to seem weird at first, but I promise it's not that bad. All right, to complete the square, it's always going to be half of this number, and you don't even need to pay attention to whether it's positive or negative, squared. Half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. I'm going to now add 4 to both sides of this equation. That's completely crazy. It seems weird, I know, but that's how you do this problem. Okay? It's half of this term right here, and half of negative 4 would be negative 2. But then you square it, and negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. This number that you add will always be a positive because it was a number squared. And if you added 4 to this side of the equation, you have to add 4 to the other side or it's not balanced. So this part right here, we did that. That's the new part. It's half of this negative 4 squared, added to both sides. Now, why in the world did I do that? Okay, well now what's left on this side is going to be factorable. Okay, it's going to be factorable like those last problems. And you're going to find a shortcut to this. I'm going to factor this. To get the a squared, it's a times a. To get the positive 4, I need two numbers that multiply to a positive but add to a negative. So they're both going to be negative. They got to multiply to 4 and add to negative 4. So it's negative 2 and negative 2. Well, if I rewrite that, that's a minus 2 squared, because there are two of them. Now that's a big deal. That's the whole reason that we call this completing the square, because we turned this into a perfect square. That's the whole point of this. Now, is there a shortcut? Can I skip this step right here? Absolutely. Here's why. It's always going to be the square root of this number here. Okay, it's always going to be that it factors into the square root of this, because it's always going to be a perfect square trinomial, and it'll always have this middle sign right here. All right, back to completing the square. The left side we completed the square, but on the right side of the equal sign, bring down that equal sign. On the right side, I got to actually add these two numbers up. 38 plus 4 is 42. From here, this problem looks just like the problems you did on your last test. To undo the square, you have to square root both sides. So I now square root. The square and square root cancel each other out, and I get a minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 42. Now, the square root of 42 maybe can be broken down. It's 21 times 2, it's 6 times 7, but none of those are perfect squares, so it's going to stay like that. Get the a by itself, add 2 to both sides. And you don't have to show this step, you can just do it. And my final answer is a equals 2, and that's this 2 right here, plus or minus the square root of 42. Okay? And that's my final answer. I know that that was kind of, well, it's pretty hardcore. It's a pretty hard problem. I can't deny it's pretty rough. I would suggest maybe backing up the video and watching that again. The next problem is going to be just like it, nothing different. But these are pretty hard problems. So go slow and watch that video again if you need to. Okay, number 4. All the rest of these problems are the same level of difficulty. It's all completing the square, okay? Try not to stress, be calm. Step 1. Okay, if you move the constant to the other side. So this 73 right here, I got to move it to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 73, subtract 73 on both sides of the equation. Okay. Now what I have left, v squared minus 20v, leave some space. You're going to need that space right there. Equals 0 minus 73, which is a negative 73. That's just setting it up so that you have space to complete the square. Now, again, the whole point of completing the square is I'm turning the left side of the equation into a perfect square. To complete the square, it's half of this guy right here squared. Half of 20 is 10. 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. We're going to add 100. Well, you can't just do it to one side of an equation, so we're going to do it to the other side of the equation as well. Okay, now the whole point of that is that now this left side should be a perfect square. Again, I'm going to show this step, but you'll be able to skip this step when you get used to it. Okay, factor the left side. To get a v squared, it's v times v. I need two numbers that multiply to a positive 100 and add to a negative 20. And it is always going to be the square root of this number. Okay, remember it's multiplying to a positive, so the signs have to be the same. Multiplies to a positive 100, adds to a negative 20, and it's negative 10 and negative 10. Okay, it will always be the square root of this with this sign over here. And v minus 10 times v minus 10, that's really v minus 10 squared, and that's why we call it completing the square, because of this perfect square. On the right side, just do some cleanup, bring down this equal sign. And on the right side, I have a negative 73 plus 100, more winning than losing. So that's going to be a positive 27. And feel free to use your calculator, but some of you have gotten really, really good at not using a calculator, so try not to use your calculator, but if you have to, you have to. Try to do it in your head first and check with your calculator. Okay, now I'm going to try to undo the square right here so I can get v by itself eventually. I'm trying to solve for v. So to undo the square, I square root both sides. Okay, so now I have the square and square root cancel each other out, so v minus 10 equals plus or minus the square root of 27. Get v by itself, add 10 to both sides. Okay, and I get v equals, this is a positive 10 plus or minus the square root of 27. Okay, now that is often the end of the problem, but we always have to check. Notice underneath this radical, the 27 can be broken down, so I do need to take this one a little bit further. So, hold on. So back to the square root of 27, we do have to break that one down. And the square root of 27 is the same as the square root of 9 times 3. And the square root of 9 is 3. So the square root of 27 is the same as 3 root 3. Which means my final answer, if I put that back together like this, back over there, my final answer is V equals 10 plus or minus 3 root 3. Okay, again, you may want to pause the video and rewatch all of those steps. And if you think you understood it, then try the next problem on your own. But honestly, I would only probably say to try up to this point before you start the video and check to make sure you got that far. Okay, so pause the video and begin number 5, at least just the first 2 steps, and let's see how it goes. Okay, well, let's see how you did. First, you should have added 98 to both sides. Okay, and that's just setting it up so that you can complete the square. So now I have v squared minus 14v, leave some space, and equals 0 plus 98, which is 98. Okay, that was the first step. Now we have to actually complete the square. You have to figure out what number to add to both sides. Okay. It should have been, hopefully you did okay, it's half of 14. It's actually half of negative 14, but half of negative 14 is negative 7. When you square it, negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive. So I always just ignore the sign at this point. So it's half of 14, which is 7, and 7 squared is 49. Add 49 to both sides. How'd it go? Did you get that? Okay, that's the point where you should have paused to make sure you did that part right. Okay, pause the video again if you didn't do that right, and now catch up and see if you can do the next step. Okay, from here, the whole point of what we just did is this is now supposed to be factorable. This is a step you can skip because it's always going to end up the same. To get a v squared, it's v times v. I need 2 numbers that multiply to a positive 49 and add to a negative 14. And it's always going to be the square root of this with this sign. So it's negative 7 and negative 7. You can skip this step and go straight to it's v minus 7 quantity squared if you want to. Bring down the equal sign. And on the right side, we have to add those 2 numbers up. So 8 and 9 will be 17. I get 147, but you better check my math. Okay? Okay, so now that you've completed the square, you created a perfect square. Now you're trying to get v by itself. So undo this square by square rooting both sides. Square and square root cancel each other out, so v minus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 147. Now get the v by itself. Over here, get this v by itself. So add 7 to both sides, which is just going to make it a positive 7 on the other side. You don't have to show this step right here every time. You should get to the point where if it's a negative over here, it's a positive on the right side. Negative on the left, positive on the right. Okay, negative here is going to mean positive over here. All right, so now I have these 7's cancel. So v equals positive 7 plus or minus the square root of 147. And you should check, but I'm going to tell you because it's a miserable number. You should check to see if you can break down the 147, but you can't, so you're done. Also, don't forget, I failed to mention, the plus or minus, remember, it actually means you have 2 answers. So this could easily be written in, I think it is in your book, it would be written 7 plus the square root of 147 and 7 minus the square root of 147. Okay? Pause the video if you want to try the next one on your own. Okay, last one. Hopefully you tried the first couple of steps on your own, or maybe even tried the whole thing on your own. I hope it went well. Let's see. First, move the 77 to the other side. So add 77 to both sides. Okay? The 77's here cancel. So r squared plus 8r, leave some space, equals 0 plus 77, which is 77. I keep giving you ones that have zeros over here, but honestly, this doesn't have to be a zero. There could be any number over there. All right, now complete the square. Figure out what we're going to add to both sides. Okay? So to complete the square, it's always half of this guy squared. Half of 8 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. Add 16, add 16. Now, the whole point of that is that this is a perfect square. Find two numbers. Whoops, let me fix that. Find two numbers that multiply to a positive 16 and add to a positive 8. Two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 8, and it's always going to be the square root of this guy with this sign. So it's going to be two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 8 would be positive 4 and positive 4. Bring down this equal sign. Add these two guys together. 77 plus 16 would be 93. Okay? The whole point of that is this is now a perfect square. This is r plus 4 squared. And on the right side I have a 93. I know I added that up a step earlier than I did in the past. That's okay. It doesn't matter either way. Undo the square root both sides, and you get that r plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 93. Subtract the 4, which is going to make it a negative 4 on the other side. Okay, and I have r equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 93. Okay, now the square root of 93, I can divide that by 3 and I get 31. But I can't break down 31 any further, and I can't break down the 3 any further. So that's it. We're done. That's your answer. So I know this is a tough one, guys, this whole lesson, completing the square. That's one of the real doozies in Algebra 1. That is not easy. So I hope that went well for you. We're going to work on it for a couple of days. Keep your notes out in front of you, and let me know if you have questions. Good luck. Your assignment is the worksheet that's called Week 2, Worksheet 2 Practice. Good luck, guys. I hope it's going well.